Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. Before we begin with Kris's unparalleled metaphysical content, I know that many of you watching have felt a sense of being ungrounded, unhinged, or out of balance in these times. I know. I've felt this way too. Kris's teachings have similarities to popular ideas such as the law of attraction and the secret. The difference is that Kris's knowledge goes even deeper into reality creation and helps resolve many of the problems identified with the law of attraction. The information he shares helps restore grounding and that sense of balance that many of us have lost in these times. If you're ready for the law of attraction and secret 2.0 and want to be a part of this fantastic community, then hit that like button, subscribe, drop a comment below, and press the bell icon so that you get notified when Kris releases cool, new metaphysical content. Kris also offers life-changing online seminars, private sessions, and mentoring sessions, which are all linked in the description below. Glad you're here with us, and let's jump into it. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. And today I'm here with Serge, and we are going to be talking about, I think Kris may have a topic in mind, and maybe I'll let Serge bring that up, or just see what comes about.
Hi, Dan.
Hello.
And I know in a recent video, Kris touched upon the subject of aliens and UFOs and stuff like that. But this verse very, very brief. And yesterday, afternoon, I was walking the dog, out of the blue, I got this stream of thoughts that he might like to revisit, the idea of ancient cultures and ancient aliens. And of course, he's going to do it his own way. So why don't we find out what's going on?
Well, sounds good. I've found that topic pretty fascinating in the past, so I'm interested to see his take on it.
Now, we trust that you are comfortable.
Oh, very comfortable. Thank you, Kris.
And we thank you for your consideration.
Oh, thanks as well.
Now, Joseph has relayed that we might like to approach the subject matter in our own fashion. As we suggested in a past video, we are not necessarily prone to speak about the subject matter in a manner similar or common to many others. We prefer to speak about it from the point of view that, first of all, the human individual vastly underestimates its own abilities, its own potentials, its own capabilities, and of course, its multi-dimensional existence. Over time, as you understand it, your society has carved a particular type of ego structure that seems to prefer to deal with intellectual, rational, logical situations, to the degree where often this ego structure becomes suspicious of any kind of information that does not come from the external senses, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth, your touch, taste. Thus, anything else seems suspect to the ego. Not that the ego is unable to deal with and appreciate information that comes from the inner realities. It is more than capable, more than you would ever think possible, but it is being hampered. You have given it a set of very strict rules that it feels it must abide by. It has become, in a certain way, like a watchdog. You train the dog to bark and even attack anything that it does not know. That is not the ego's sole function. It is, again, more than capable of dealing with, of deciphering, translating, and handling information from many different sources. As an analogy that we've utilized in the past, it has become accustomed to dealing with the news that is delivered through the newspaper at the front door of your house. You simply ignore all the news that is delivered at the back door of the house. You let it pile up. In this way, it might seem overwhelming to the manner in which it is being backlogged. It may seem like an enormous function now to deal with all this information. You have trained it to be weary of it, so it just seems to want to push back against it, even though its own very existence depends upon the deeper functions of the mind, the subconscious, and the self. So you have simply trained it to ignore its own source of being, to your own personal and cultural detriment, to detriment of your own civilization. But because all of this backlogged information, in many ways, demands attention, simply because it is vital for your species' survival, sometimes it appears to you that it intrudes. It may seem to barge in to your neatly detailed little reality and upset all of your preciously laid out apple carts. And then you yell at it. It is not necessarily its fault. You have set up certain conditions that are truly, ultimately unrealistic. Much like thinking you could swim faster if you cut off your legs to get rid of excess weight. Not a practical idea in the long run. So the idea here is that the ego can handle so much more information that you have denied it. But if you do expand the notions of worlds that exist beyond your own, in fact, the world of your own imagination, to yourself, to your subconscious, is as real as the so-called the official line of consciousness, your consensus reality. You can also develop an awareness that there are multiple lines of consensus reality running simultaneously. You refer to them as parallel or probable worlds, something even your quantum physicists are exploring and discovering. This has certainly not been a recent development. It is not something that suddenly occurred yesterday or a few days back or a few years ago. It has been with your different species, literally forever. You simply need to shut it out so that you can concentrate on the task at hand, which is building your consensus reality. But these other realities still exist and function. And there are times when the so-called veil between those different realities, or even if you call them dimensions, becomes very thin and sometimes seems to have worn away. And someone who is appropriately trained may notice that it has more holes in it than a piece of Swiss cheese, which is very interesting to become aware of, especially if you like Swiss cheese. Now, throughout even we refer to your modern history, even if you think about it as ancient history, because for all intents and purposes, you are rather modern. There have been more ancient human species and humanoids on this planet and this plane of existence than you can shake a stick at. So your particular development as a species has encountered all sorts of strange phenomena. There are depictions in ancient caves and tunnels, on ancient rock walls, of humanoid-like beings that simply cannot be explained away. There have been recorded instances, even as far back as ancient Greek Roman times, medieval times, Middle Age times, of seeing objects in the sky, even of seeing flying devices having battles in the sky, and the fallout, killing hundreds of people, populations succumbing to different kinds of toxins or poisons. This is also alluded to very strongly in the ancient Vedic writings. There have been reported sightings in this way as well, even in medieval times, across certain portions of Europe. Australian Aboriginal people have depictions of rather alien / godlike beings on certain rock walls and cave walls. And these things also occur in many other parts of the world. Almost as if some of your ancestors had some kind of contact with other kinds of beings. The Dogon people in Africa have intimate knowledge of the Sirius dog star system that was not available even to astronomers at that particular time. And yet their knowledge seemed rather well detailed. There are other cultures that had knowledge of ancient stars, the paths of the stars and planetary bodies, of celestial events, eclipses, supernova, and so many other things that seems to be inexplicable, because you seem to consider your ancestors as rather ape-like, of lesser intelligence. And yet, many of them were knowledgeable in things that even today may still boggle your own minds. And yes, there have been many kinds of visitors from other systems to your world. But the greatest kinds of visits were not necessarily in flying saucers, as much as they were visitations during the shaman's deep trance states, exploring inner worlds as a means of contact with some of these parallel or probable alternate developments in other realities. And they would awaken from their trances and carve or paint or rub some of these memories into rock faces, rock walls, creating effigies of them, discussing some of the information that was presented to these shamans and wise beings. And this has occurred more than enough times. And in particular, there are, even to this day, many people who have such excursions into other realities that to the normal individual would seem rather alien to them, simply because it is a little difficult for the ordinary individual to translate that kind of information into everyday vernacular, simply because it is rather foreign to their understanding of space, time, and reality. And there are other systems of reality where the physics are even very different from your own. So to expect that the translations be as accurate as possible can at times be difficult. There often has to be a certain degree of distortion. Even the so-called channeled material, to claim that it is 100% pure and undistorted, should be questioned. Simply because you exist in a certain type of camouflage reality, a reality that is created by your senses. So there has to be a certain level of distortion in order to accommodate your particular kind of sensory perceptions. The dogs, the birds, and the fish, many other creatures, view their world very differently than the way you, as human beings, view your world. Everything you see is a result of two things: the rods and cones in your eyes and your particular perceptions. Apart from that, reality itself is very, very different than the manner in which you perceive it. And that is an important thing to keep in mind. Thus, many of these particular visits are often perceived in altered states of consciousness, in deep trance states of consciousness, sometimes even in comatose states. In individuals who have a rather strong religious understanding and affiliation, they might interpret some of these visitors as angels. If their particular mindset is on the more negative side, they might interpret them as unsavory beings. And because they do not understand the nature of reality itself, they would believe strongly that this is what they saw, even though the energy behind is just a projection of their own perceptions. But there is a being that triggers the perception. You simply view it as a reflection of your own, either fears or desires for experience. And again, this is a process that has occurred many, many times in the course of your history, where you have perceived events and circumstances and conditions that exist actually beyond the scope of your physical senses, but your physical senses need to interpret what they see. And that is a very important distinction. And the entire experience can seem so real and so profound, the individual may be unable to distinguish it, or to distinguish whether it is a psychological or physical experience. And it would then be viewed as a physical experience, at least to begin with. Sometimes the very same process occurs when someone leaves your physical plane to the process of death. They might think they are perceiving their relatives or their religious iconography, until such a point when they realize that all of what is being projected actually comes from within their own stock of belief systems, their own library of iconography that is projected outwardly for them to perceive. Does that make some sense to you?
Yes, it does, Kris. I mean, yeah, it draws a question. As I definitely understand the internal projections, how that's forming reality. I guess the question too is if we're perceiving relatives, or are they also sharing in that reality, or I know it's all created internally, but then are there overlaps or sharing going on as well?
There can, in terms of perceiving previously deceased relatives, there can indeed be a projection from the relative themselves, till such a point where the individual can then let go of the projection, no longer has a need to be comforted, and begins to explore and experience their newfound level of existence. Then the pretenses and the projections simply drop off. In terms of the ancient cultures and ancient aliens, there is a similar phenomenon. There are indeed many developed entities far beyond the scope of human understanding, even far beyond the scope of our own understanding. We are not the first to say this either. But since they share a particular kind of sweet vested interest in the nature of your species development, because they may, in part, have shared in the seeding of souls that create your lives. So they have this kind of vested interest in providing assistance in a manner that does not intrude upon your realities, but that actually helps push the boundaries of what you think is reality, helping you question the nature of reality, so that you may one day come to the understanding that you create that reality yourselves. It is not being created for you. You're not forced into anything. There are no karmic debts to be paid in any sense of the term. You create your reality. And in those terms, it is actually very, very simple and basic. It's either you do or you don't. You may think, well, I will say I create my reality if everything goes exactly the way I want. And if it does not, I will say it is not my reality. It does not work that way. And your species will eventually come to understand this. And the idea that there are advanced beings that may drop in for a visit once in a while is not to save you. None of them have the intention of saving you, because they cannot, because they do not create your reality. They would, however, seek to empower you. They would seek to provide the means by which you can gain insight into enriching your own fulfillment. But they will not step in and say, okay, well, you guys have struggled for a while, so now we will all take you up into a nice place where you have no more problems. It does not work like that. So again, these visitors do not come to alter your DNA and to make you super beings. They never have. But they do come to entice you to question the nature of what you think is reality. They do come to entice you to look into your own abilities and to own up to those abilities. They do come to strongly suggest that the only thing alien is your life is that part of yourself that you may have refused to look at. They become then a reflection of that which you consider alien within yourself, your own abilities to create your realities. It does not mean they do not exist, but they are not your saviors. There is no savior in that sense of the word. There is no supernatural sky being who will come from the clouds in great flowing white robes and lift you up into the heavens. We hate to break it to so many religious affiliations, but you will find that out on your own. The main idea is that your world is filled with wonders you have not even been able to imagine as of yet. And your ego, as much as you would like to keep it tied down with ball and chain, is able to help you explore, to help you explore much more of your own existence, of your own abilities, than you have ever considered possible before. So for the time being, if you like to think that some aliens come to the earth and they will build you different kinds of devices, will build you some pyramids and so on and so forth, you're entirely free to do so. But we can tell you that there have been ancestors whose DNA runs in your blood that have developed great technologies pre-deluge time. There were many great civilizations pre-flood. And we are a little loath to utilize antediluvian because it's a specific reference to biblical times. And the idea of the flood in the Bible is simply plagiarized from even more ancient cultures. It is not unique. And it does not mean because it is in the Bible, it is the only real authentic one. There are many ancient writings that speak of these things on a much greater scale and with far more accuracy. And these cultures were submerged to simply disappear, at least from the vision of your world. They may have continued in other worlds, however. And there are individuals who are significantly psychically developed that they can project their consciousness into your reality to observe how you are developing. Sometimes you may sense them. Sometimes you may think you're perceiving something without recognizing what exactly it is that you're perceiving. But these are also some of the ancestors that are visiting you to see how their particular progeny is progressing. So these kinds of lucid journeys of consciousness by other beings, of course, is not limited only to those ancient beings. Your species also does that. Every single one of you, at approximately 40 odd minutes of sleep, when you enter REM, rapid eye movement sleep, you are perceiving so many images. Some of them have to do with your journeys elsewhere, outside of the context of the time and space that you know, as you are also prone to visit others. You may visit some of your future selves, some of your other selves, past selves. You may also visit some of your brethren that have continued their existence in other realms, other dimensions. And in those particular kinds of excursions, all sorts of information is exchanged. Some of the others may glean little bits of knowledge and insights from your own observations, just as you glean bits of insights and wisdom from their experiences. You may awaken with all sorts of great ideas that transform your lives. Some of your people have had great insights that turn into magnificent inventions that change the face of your culture. And that may indeed have been the result of some of these excursions. You interpreted some of the inventions from other realities into terms that fit into yours, and vice versa. So there are all sorts of delightful things that are available to your species, and it would greatly benefit you to loosen your hold, literally your stranglehold upon your much maligned ego, because it is entirely capable, more so even, to assist you than you suspect. So how does that sound to you right now?
Well, I like it. Yeah, to allow more of that content in, and to make more of it conscious. I think that would be a fun activity. Yeah.
Indeed. Through altered states of consciousness, utilizing hypnosis, self-hypnosis, steering away from the classic hypnotic procedures for delving into quote unquote past lives, as if time is a linear progression of events, especially in the light of even some of your most recent scientific discoveries, that time is not linear. To insist that lives only function in a linear manner is counterproductive. So by expanding that and taking down those barriers, an individual can very, very nicely begin to explore some of these subject matters, exploring the very museum of consciousness that contains all of your ideas of time, space, and then some. So we believe now would be a good time for a little break.
I think so. I think we're going to leave a couple cliffhangers for the next episode, but we'll get back to it then.
Indeed. And we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Kris. Thanks for watching, and if you would like to leave a question for Kris, drop it in the comments below. Myself, Serge, or someone from the Kris team will be checking and may use them to drive the discussion, put them in future episodes. So if you'd like to interact with the Kris community, feel free. Put your questions below, and we'd love to hear from you, and see you again next time.